This chapter of My Hero Academia was definitely interesting in my opinion, although not much really happened, so this may be a short review given how brief I usually am in my reviews with each topic. So if it does turn out to be a very short review, I'm really sorry about that. But what I want to talk about is of course what happened in this chapter, starting with the whole Dobby and whatever this ice villain or ice member of the Liberation Army is called. I'll be honest with you, their exchange of attacks didn't really seem too interesting in this chapter in my opinion, mostly because we didn't really get any sort of major interactions. All we really saw was how Dabi and this ice user was seemingly flexing their quirks to see as who was capable of doing more, and we're cut off to Mr. Compress and Twice later on in this chapter, which was the sort of the highlight of the chapter. So going from last chapter, we thought that this chapter was going to mainly focus on Dabi's fight, but it turns out that that's not really the case. And I'll be honest with you, I really hope that they don't off-screen this fight or the majority of this fight, because it is something that I would really like to see. I would really like to see Dabi in a full-on fight with someone that can actually hold their own against someone like him, because as we know, Dabi is one of the stronger users in the League of Villains, and having someone that can actually stand up to that kind of firepower will definitely show us just what kind of level Dabi really is at, because right now we've never really seen him go all out against someone, at least not extensively enough that we could really measure how powerful he is in terms of both just quirk potency, but also just how good is he overall as a fighter. That is something that I would really like to find out, and that's why I hope this fight isn't off-screened. Now, it probably won't be, at least not the entirety of it, because, well, Dobby is quite a major character, so to see his fight being off-screen, it would definitely upset a lot of people, and I don't really think Horikoshi wants to do that, especially with all of this sort of hints we've been getting with Dobby and who he may be. Of course, at this point, it is still just theory, but a lot of people are speculating that Dobby is one of the Todoroki brothers that have been missing for, well, the entirety of the story really, because as we know, he kind of left the family, I guess, and did his own thing. We do know the name of said brother, but Dobby hasn't revealed his real name, so we don't really know if that's him. We can probably speculate, considering they both seemingly used fire and so on and so forth. Now, when the chapter cut off to Mr. Compress, we really see how Mr. Compress is seemingly analyzing the entire situation. He knows that Spinner and Shigaraki are together. He doesn't really know where Toga is, but he knows that Twice has been gone to look for Toga, probably because Twice was with Mr. Compress seemingly, well, at least based on what he said, because he seemed surprised when Twice went missing, so we can probably assume that Twice was with Mr. Compress, but now he's obviously found Toga, as we saw later in this chapter, so he doesn't really seem to be doing much fighting. Rather, instead, he is more observing how everything goes. Unless someone confronts him, I'm sure he will have to fight, but so far it doesn't really seem like anyone major has really run into Mr. Compress in order to fight him, and I think that really shows us what kind of character Mr. Compress is. We never usually see Mr. Compress in a head-on fight. He's usually a very mysterious character because of the nature of his quirk. His quirk is not very well suited for a fight, let's be honest. If he had to fight someone, he could fight definitely, but without prep time, I don't really think he would be very good. He's the type of character that probably would need a lot of prep time in a fight in order to be at his peak, if you know what I mean. Alright, so the last thing I want to talk about is of course Twice and the Toga. Now, Twice found Toga in that shed where Toga hid in order to recover, and obviously she's not quite dead, but when Twice finds her, he's really shocked by the fact that, how beaten up she is, and the fact that her body seems very cold, which I guess makes sense. If she's lost a lot of blood, her body's bound to be a lot colder than usual, although still recovering, which we know based around what that guy from the Superpower Liberation Army said. He did say that Toga is alive, but that they should kill her in order to make up for what she did to Curious or Kizuki Chitose. Now, when Twice finds her, we see a lot of this split personality shit going around, which, as we know, is one of Twice's things. He has a very big problem when it comes to this split personality of his. He'll say one thing and then another part of his head will think a completely different thing, and this is like a constant battle like inside of Twice's head, which is probably my favorite part about his character, arguably the only part about his character that I personally like. So just letting you guys know, like, I'm not a huge Twice fan, although I know there's a lot of people out there that like Twice. I'm not one of those people, because to me he hasn't really done much and he's just overall not the most likable character yet. So to me, he's gonna have to really earn that likable spot to me before I can really say that this is a character that I roll with. But for now, like, seeing this split personality shit going on, I like that, because it actually makes me quite interested whenever he's on screen, because I really like seeing the, I guess, mental interactions between his multiple personalities within his head. And I think that is going to be something that's definitely going to be like a huge thing for his character in the future. I mean, it's obviously going to be, especially now in this arc, because as we saw at the end of the chapter, we did see how his mask was taken off, which, as we know, is really bad for Twice. Like, if his mask is taken off, he will go batshit crazy pretty much, and that is not good for his split personality. Like, way back when we got that one chapter of Twice's backstory, when he made a lot of clones and eventually he lost sight of who he really was, which caused all of this shit to go down, which the Quirk Liberation Army seems to know about because they mentioned it in this chapter. And I found that to be something that's gonna come back to bite Twice really hard. But what's more interesting is that the Liberation Army really seems like they want to recruit Twice, because they mentioned at the end of the chapter that they want to draft him, and I'm guessing that means they want to pull him into their ranks rather than actually killing him. And I find it really interesting how they're picking Twice out of all people. So I wonder if they're gonna do the same with Spinner, because as we know, Spinner believes in the ideals of Stain, and Shigaraki is not really following the will of Stain right now. So I'm wondering if the Quirk Liberation Army is going to try and recruit both Twice as well as Spinner. But going back to Twice, we saw how this other member, like this big shot from the Quirk Liberation Army, sent a whole army of Twice clones against him, which is quite ironic given that Twice's quirk revolves around making clones. So it's going to be one of those fights, where Twice is gonna have to fight a quirk that's quite similar to that of his own. The difference here being that the guy who he's fighting, he makes clones out of inanimate objects that are kind of like human sized. I believe the quirk was called Human Shape, which allows him to transform refrigerators and the likes into human puppets. So I'm quite hyped about this fight that we're gonna see between Twice and this guy called Tomoyasu Shikasuko. And his codename, so to speak, much like Kizuki's codename was Curious, this guy's codename is Skeptic. So I wonder who's gonna win, or rather what the outcome is going to be, because I have a feeling it's not as simple as winning and losing, especially given the nature of this arc. Like, as we've seen now with Twice, they don't necessarily want to beat him up and have him killed. They seem to want to draft him into the Quirk Liberation Army, unlike with Toga, where they just want to kill her. Anyway, that's it for this review. I hope you liked this chapter. I certainly did, although I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite chapters of this arc so far, but it's definitely an interesting chapter, especially the whole thing with Twice. So I hope that really leads into something even more interesting, kind of like what I discussed in this video. So yeah, I'd love to know what you think down below in the comments, and as always, if you did, be sure to Detroit smash that like button if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. This has been Chaotic Plus, and remember everyone, Toga is waifu, Toga is laifu.